You're entering Corsi Nation.
This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and we have Mike McCormick back with us as a guest today. Mike, how are you?
Good, Jerry. Good to see you again. Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure. And we're reviewing. We've done a number of shows with Mike on his current book, and his current book is about Joe Biden. I'll pull it from the shelf. Mike, why don't you tell us, you were a stenographer at the White House. Why don't you explain that background? I'll pull your book so we can show the cover.
Yeah. So I was a stenographer at the White House with the press office from 2002 through 2018. So I worked with three presidents, President Bush, President Obama, and President Trump for a year. And I got a chance to see how the press operates behind the scenes. My job was to be present when the president or the vice president spoke to the press, make a recording of it, and then type that into the official White House transcript, so that if there was a discrepancy between what was said by the press, the White House had their version. So that was me. I spent a lot of time in the White House, West Wing, traveled on Air Force One, traveled on Air Force Two, around the world. When I was there with Obama, I spent 6 years working specifically for Joe Biden, traveled with him to China, to Russia, to Ukraine, and now understand the depth of corruption. I got a hold of the Hunter Biden laptop from my friends at Marco Polo. Garrett Ziegler gave that to me a couple of years ago, and I started writing the Substack that I create, Midnight in the Laptop of Good and Evil, based on what I find in there, and that's where the book comes out of. And as I learn all these facts in this book about Joe Biden, then I stumbled across about a year ago, in the spring of 2024, information that just sort of appeared out of investigation I did. I thought to myself, who would be the most evil person that Joe Biden interacted with? And that was Theodore McCarrick. I went into White House visitor logs, and the revelation of evil was almost insurmountable. And that's the title of the next book, An Almost Insurmountable Evil: How Obama's Deep State Defiled the Catholic Church and Executed the Wuhan Pandemic.
Okay, so this follows your current book. The current book is The Case to Impeach and Imprison Joe Biden.
That's correct.
And this is by Bombardier Books, which is Post Hill Press.
Right.
And Anthony Zaccardi, who has been my editor, and I'm an acquiring editor now with Post Hill Press, able to acquire books. And you did yours before I became an acquiring editor.
Yeah.
And so I'm not an acquiring editor of this book, although I would have been had I had the opportunity. And your new book on the specifics of the corruption that came to the Catholic Church from the Biden-Obama administration. And I think Obama was still calling the shots when Biden was the president. I don't have really much doubt about that. I think Obama has always been in charge. And this is his third term, as it were. So we're going to cover this today, and specifically, we're going to preview your new book.
Good.
Now, you've had two your Substack,
right,
which is Midnight in the Laptop of Good and Evil. And Chris, if you can show the one on the Mike's podcast on the two popes. More CIA-fueled Hollywood evil for all to see.
That's right. Yeah. What happened was
show that up on the screen if we can. Here's that, and here it is in the chat. I'll give it to you.
Right.
I just put in chat that's it right there. The two popes. Okay, more CIA-fueled Hollywood evil for all to see. We're gonna go through this in some detail.
Because our last show we talked about Conclave, that movie that just came out couple of months ago and is now probably heading for an Academy Award nomination. It won a Golden Globe. So when I saw that movie, I went to that movie, and then just as I was looking into it, I didn't realize The Two Popes was an actual movie until just about 2 weeks ago. Stumbled across that on a Netflix viewer and said, wait a minute, what is that going to be about? And when I saw that, this is when the real evil of Hollywood and the CIA operations within Hollywood came visibly apparent.
because again, this the messaging of the conclave, for those who haven't seen the film, is that and the Pope dies, and there's this conclave to select a new Pope, and the Pope they select happens to be this Pope, candidate, a cardinal who shows up from nowhere, and he gets ultimately selected to be the Pope, and he ends up being a hermaphrodite. He's got male genitalia, but the internal organs of a female, and this is celebrated in the movie as the high point of the Catholic Church to have a hermaphrodite Pope, which is kind of the wet dream of this New World Order sexual perversion, which is separating gender from sex. And the idea is if you can merge male and female in one, the ancient idea of a hermaphrodite, which is typically male genitalia and female organs, then you've reached the epitome. You resolve the dichotomy of male female by merging them into one new synthetic entity. The Hegelian dialectic. You've got thesis male, antithesis female, and synthesis hermaphrodite. And now we're all happy. We're all in heaven. We've resolved the dichotomies. We've come to a new level. Okay, so that's the esoteric kind of communication of this whole gender dystopia, which is a neo-Marxist idea designed to ultimately destroy God, that we can create the perfect world by re-engineering human nature into a new transformative transhuman gender nature platform in which we become the gods. Okay, so now this movie here on the Netflix, which you encountered later, what you found is that both Barack and Michelle Obama had a big role in Netflix, which produced this Two Popes video, which is still showing today on Netflix. So do you want to discuss the background of Barack and Michelle Obama and how they have influenced Netflix?
Right. So, Barack Obama was the Hollywood A-list president. He was close with Hollywood throughout his presidency. And what was interesting to me, actually, whenever he went to California, Michelle rarely went with him. Even though she loved California, he went out there by himself without her. So I think there was stuff in California that he liked to do that didn't include her. And I personally think that's why she did not have a great desire to return to the White House. So that said, they started, and when they did get out to continue this sort of public presentation of themselves as a married couple who gets along with each other and produces fantastic democratic policies, they started a production company, and that became part of Netflix. Also, one of their chief operatives, Obama's chief operative, Susan Rice, was named to the board of Netflix. I heard that from someone on my Substack chat. So there's a lot of Obama connections into Hollywood. And this Netflix, when I saw this show, I was like, wait a minute. They made that show while they were working on that show. 2017 is when they started writing it. And then they finished it in 2019. It was premiered. That's when the Obamas were in there. So they had a lot of say, I believe, behind the scenes in what was done with this Two Popes. And so the Two Popes, to me, is Hollywood's CIA cover story of the Obama administration's operation to install Pope Francis into the Vatican.
Well, now specifically, I think Barack, had his own extracurricular sexual activities going on in Hollywood, which were probably not of a bisexual nature.
That's what I think too.
And Michelle may not have wanted to participate in those. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just speculating. And they created a production company called Higher Ground Productions. Of course, we're going to go to a new level here. This is, we're going to leave behind this old Christianity and this nonsense about God and sky fairies and all the rest. We're going to go to a higher level here. and they entered into a multi-year deal with Netflix in 2018 to produce a variety of content, including scripted and unscripted series, documentaries, feature films. And the production deal was described as the Obama's deal with Netflix was aimed at producing content that promotes empathy and understanding, touching on issues like race, class, democracy, and civil rights. Their company, Higher Ground Productions, was created specifically for this partnership. Okay, so you've got here a whole idea that you've got. This is New Age. This is this is your basic critical thinking. This is your woke. We've got we've got class, race, equality. This is Obama's fundamental change of America into a Marxist country or neo-Marxist country. Okay, so now what the backstory of this is that Pope Benedict resigned, and that was unusual in the Catholic Church. No pope, I think, had resigned for something like 700 years, or the first pope emeritus maybe 600 years.
Right.
And the two popes was produced as a CIA cover story that is trying to disguise the fact that the decision for Pope Benedict XVI to resign and for Bergoglio to become the Pope was a CIA coup d'etat of the Catholic Church, which Archbishop Vigano calls the Deep Church.
Right.
Deep Church having a coup d'etat to replace Benedict, who was a more traditional Pope, believed in traditional Catholic theology, with Bergoglio, whose aim was to bring Vatican II, which had started in 1962, full circle into being the more progressive church. In other words, the LGBT church.
Right.
And so therefore, the two popes introduced this fantasy that Pope Benedict had become friends with Bergoglio before the resignation. Now, I mean, is it the case that Benedict and Bergoglio, Jorge Bergoglio of Argentina, who became Pope Francis, were they great friends prior to the resignation?
No. And, it's interesting in the movie, to the two popes, it starts off with Bergoglio was the second behind when Benedict was voted in 2005, I believe. Bergoglio was the second guy behind him. So there was a rivalry there, and the movie begins with that conclave and the rivalry and how Benedict wins that vote and then becomes the Pope, and then realizes a few years later he's too old, he's tired. There's been some scandals in the Vatican. It's time for him to consider who is Bergoglio and why is he so popular. And so they have this series of conversations at the summer home, Benedict's summer home in Rome, not in the Vatican, but at the summer home.
Right. So Pope Benedict the 16th died in December 31st, 2022.
Yeah, just about 2 years ago.
About 2 years ago. And his full name was Joseph Ratzinger, who's German.
Ratzinger. Right.
Right. Okay. And he headed the Catholic Church from 2005 until his resignation, which occurred on February 28th, 2013. Okay. And then that's when Pope Francis Bergoglio at the conclave was selected to be Pope. No longer second choice, but now first choice. And again, the whole backstory here is that this was a CIA coup d'etat to undermine the traditional authority of the Catholic Church to move it in this LGBT direction. Archbishop Vigano has consistently opposed this. In fact, Pope Francis excommunicated Archbishop Vigano for having exposed so much of the scandal of the Catholic Church going in an LGBT direction. And again, I've published the book here. This is Archbishop Vigano's book. He's the author of this on J'accuse, I Accuse, and the subtitle is Shedding Light on My, quote, excommunication. It's also a post-Hill book. It's not very thick, but it's very important. It's Bergoglio's explanation that the real heretic here is Pope Francis, who's abandoned traditional Catholic theology for this idea of bringing this modern sexual view of, we've got to bring the LGBT into the church and give them a seat at the table. Now, from Vigano's perspective, and I would agree that, many of these sexual perversions, these two men, they just love each other. Well, we're not going to talk about homosexual sex that is sacrilegious, having homosexual sex with Jesus Christ on the crucifix. We're not going to talk about the whips and chains and all the other parts of homosexual. We're not going to talk about the gay pride events with naked men walking through the streets in front of children. We also published the Italian version of J'accuse, which is now available in the United States and in Italy, and is again causing quite a sensation because Archbishop Vigano is probably the strongest traditional critic of the Catholic Church under Bergoglio. Now, in this movie, we're dealing with a psychological operation, and it's designed to make Bergoglio and Benedict close friends and confidants. Look at how these two men lovingly are just talking about the crisis, this scandal. Well, the scandal was a scandal that occurred around the end of Pope Benedict's papacy, in which his butler had a series of letters that he maintained and kept, and it had revealed private investigations that Benedict XVI was doing into scandals in the church, which included both financial scandals with the Vatican Bank and also some of the sex scandals and the pedophilia with the priests having sex with altar boys and in general young boys. And that scandal did lead to a great conflict for Pope Benedict and was made to be the underlying reason why they say he resigned. I'm sure there was more to it than that the CIA undoubtedly had blackmail material on Pope Benedict XVI and undoubtedly was applying the pressure to him that if he didn't resign, the Catholic Church would suffer major calamities from what the CIA would expose. Now, I don't yet know what the secrets were, but I can see the pattern here very clearly. Mike, do you want to comment on that?
Well, yeah. So what I write about in my book, and the new book coming out, is an almost insurmountable evil, how the Obama's deep state defiled the Catholic Church and executed the Wuhan pandemic. So what happened was they were working on. McCarrick was was basically, I think, a CIA operative.
McCarrick is Archbishop McCarrick, who was
Archbishop Theodore McCarrick. He came out of New Jersey and moved it to become the Archbishop of Washington, and in a highly politicized era. So it was 2000, right at the end of Pope John Paul II's term. Very soon after, shortly thereafter, he was working with Pope Benedict. And by the time, and then as Pope Benedict came in, he was energized when Obama became the president in 2008. Obama became the president through help with the Catholic Church in Chicago. Kind of a, not exactly a very progressive Catholic Church in Chicago. And they hired Obama they gave him money. They paid him to go out and do pastoral work, community organizing on the south side of Chicago. That's how he got his start. So the Chicago bishop was a big part of Obama's beginning. And the Catholic Church was backing him. Chicago liberals were backing him. And so he rose up. And as he rose up, McCarrick rose up. And they combined forces around 2008 through a guy named Dennis McDonough. Dennis McDonough is a Catholic. He had two brothers who were Catholic priests. One is since retired. One was had a high-level job in the Diocese of Minneapolis, St. Paul, but then he got demoted because he was covering for child sex activities by priests out there, predatory priests. So they demoted him. He's now a parish pastor. So McDonough knew what was going on, and he goes in and he starts connecting in with Pope Benedict almost even before Obama even gets in the White House. He's reaching out to Pope Benedict through another Catholic named John Podesta. So at this time, this is 2008, they had set up kind of these outreach programs for the Democratic Party's progressive wing to engage with the Catholic Church and make it more progressive. And it didn't work well because Benedict was anti. They were standing in the way of abortion rights that Obama wanted to push, and also the health care rights. They were sort of forcing the sisters, the nuns, I think it was Little Sisters of the Poor, to accept that in their health care programs that they would have
abortion rights,
and conception, birth control. Birth control is part of what they were supposed to do, and so they were like, well, we don't want to do that. So they actually fought that and won it in the Supreme Court eventually in 2020. But during this process,
who won that?
There's Little Sisters of Poor won that case.
Yes.
So they said, the Supreme Court said, nope, you can't force these sisters to have healthcare plans that don't reflect their religious beliefs. So they moved the Obama administration, McDonough, and so he started having all these meetings with McCarrick in the White House. And that's what I document in the book. And it becomes very obvious that they want to get rid of Benedict, and then he's gone. And he announces his resignation. So what the movie The Two Popes is the CIA's excuse, their version of events. What was really important about the movie The Two Popes is it was an all-star cast. John Lithgow was not John Lithgow. I don't remember right off the top of my head the cast. The guy who was in Silence of the Lambs played Pope Benedict. I don't remember the actor's name right off the top of my head.
I'll get them for you right in a second here.
And so because of that, these were high-profile actors.
Anthony Hopkins, and Jonathan Price. Jonathan
Price was Pope Bergoglio. The world automatically accepted them because they had so much familiarity with these actors and they were so dynamic. Well, they got Academy Award nominations. So this movie comes out in September and it garners 3 main Academy Award nominations. And that's also, to me, how the CIA manipulates information. They use the Academy Awards. That's a global platform to get their message across. So they had these video clips of what the popes were doing during the Academy Awards ceremony, and that came out in February of 2020. So this is all a very succinct operation done by the CIA and the Obama people in 2019, 2020 to move Trump out of the way. They wanted to use this movie to. There's an anti-Trump underlying message in there. They are Pope Francis is pro-immigration. He's pro-refugee. He's anti-immigration restriction. So they go against this in the movie.
The background of the story, the two popes, and first of all, the Pope Benedict was absolutely opposed to the homosexuality agenda or the pedophilia.
Right.
He did not want that in the Catholic Church, and he was also aware of the scandals involving the Vatican Bank. In 2000, the movie came out in 2019. Okay,
fall of 2019.
Right. Okay, so this was during Trump's administration that this film came out, and Trump's first term, and so they're trying to cover up here to make these two popes look like they're collegial and working together and cover up a coup d'etat.
That's right.
Now the coup d'etat that was really what the real incident here is that after Bergoglio took over and became Pope, Bergoglio fostered a plan by McCarrick, who was working with the Biden White House, to, in Honduras, make a deal with the corrupt president of Honduras to allow the smuggling of drugs and the sex trade to go on, including the underage child sex trade,
Right.
openly. And this was a deal that was put together by McCarrick.
And well, Joe Biden. Joe Biden was the author of, it's called the Alliance for Prosperity. So basically what happened was Bergoglio gets installed as Pope Francis in March of 2013. And all of a sudden in the following year, Obama goes to the Vatican in March of 2014. And as he's in the Vatican, all of a sudden these kids start showing up on the southern border, unaccompanied minors. They're traveling to Mexico and they're crossing into the southern border without parents. Most of them are 16, 15, boys and girls. There's a lot of abuse on them because the cartels are the ones that are basically taking them in on this journey. But there's young kids in this group. 60,000 kids show up over the course of that year. And it becomes the unaccompanied minor crisis, gets to the headlines in June of 2014. McCarrick is doing a lot of back and forth with the White House, and Biden becomes the point man for this. And he starts having meetings with these, there's Central American countries. There's three in this, they call them the Northern Triangle countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. Well, the guy who's in charge of Honduras is a cartel-affiliated drug smuggler named Juan Orlando Hernandez. He's now in prison. Joe Biden had him arrested in prison for doing what Joe Biden was letting him do while he was vice president. When Juan Orlando Hernandez, as president, ended his term, he lost his presidential immunity. They arrested him and put him in prison so that he would be quiet. He couldn't be a witness against Joe Biden. So that's the deep, dark background of Honduras politics. Juan Orlando Hernandez was aligned with the Sinaloa cartel. They were smuggling drugs into America, cocaine into America by the ton in 2014 through 2022. They started it in 2002. They installed this guy in the winter of 2013, just about the same time as they installed Pope Francis. So they were doing the Pope Francis installation in 2013 by the CIA, the Juan Orlando Hernandez installation. This was all part of a large program, and they wanted to liberalize immigration, and that's what they did. So where do all these kids come from? Who tells these kids, hey, you guys should go to America? 60,000 of them. Was it the CIA? Was it the church? Or was it, the cartels that told them to do this? Because all these kids start showing up. And what was the motivating factor? So these are the questions that aren't answered. No one ever asked these questions. The press never did. So what Biden did was he just started throwing money at the problem. He invited Juan Orlando Hernandez into the White House, the presidents of the other Northern Triangle countries into the White House in July of 2014. And weeks later, who goes into the White House to do a bunch of meetings with Dennis McDonough? Theodore McCarrick, Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. He was directly involved in setting the policy for this Alliance for Prosperity. The policy announcement and the amount of money they're going to spend on it is announced in November 2014. It's voted on by the Congress and it's passed through. It's voted on by a Congress that was a lame duck Congress because at the time, the Democrats still had power in the Senate. In 2014, the power flipped back to the Republicans. So this was a Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Democratic Party, progressive manipulation of our politics to liberalize immigration, and they used the Catholic Church as a tool in their policy program. And that's what Pope Francis allowed. He was part of that.
Okay, now let's get into the more detail of the movie. So this is this Leaks, the scandal about Vatican leaks, began in 2012. Okay, and it was involved with the one of the personal secretaries of Pope Benedict had kept letters and other papers from Pope Benedict that he should have destroyed. He was asked to destroy, and they were turned over to a journalist, a guy named Nuzzi, who published these. And a lot of the letters were from Archbishop Vigano. Archbishop Vigano had exposed the corruption that was plaguing the Holy See, including the pedophilia scandal, the scandal of McCarrick. McCarrick was not only having sex with underage boys, he was having sex with seminarians who he would lure into his bed on certain outings that he would invite the seminarians to. And eventually, McCarrick was defrocked. He was laicized, as they say, and removed of his, no longer a priest, but not excommunicated. And so, therefore, you've got a situation in which now McCarrick is completely identified with the sex scandal in the Catholic Church, the homosexual pedophilia sex scandal in the Catholic Church. And McCarrick, through the Biden administration, until he was defrocked, was a very, very influential figure. Okay, he'd been Archbishop of New York. He'd been an Archbishop of Washington. He had access to raising a lot of money. Okay, but he resigned in 2006. Pope Benedict XVI accepted his resignation as Archbishop of Washington.
He had to do that at age 75. That's a standard rule of the Vatican and the curate.
Yes, but he was not. When he was defrocked years later. When was he defrocked?
Yes, he was defrocked in 2019.
2019.
Yeah, officially. Right. He was defrocked in 2018, and he protested it, but then his protest was dissuaded in 2019.
Final February 16, 2019, he had been laicized, which means he'd been removed as being a priest.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
And so this movie's coming out in 2019. You've had McCarrick, who's been exposed as the scandal. McCarrick has been at the center of this Biden pedophilia scandal and, cocaine smuggling scandal with Honduras.
And all secret. No one knows about it. No one's talked about it. The White House press corps did nothing about it. They just accepted it and, passed on the information. Oh, yeah, we're going to help these poor countries down there. And they didn't even look at what was going on with the drug smuggling. It was, it wasn't until it wasn't until President Trump came in that the Honduran drug smuggling was exposed. He exposed it. And so that's when, and that was in 2018, he exposed it by arresting the brother of the president, Juan Orlando Hernandez's brother. So he gets arrested in 2018. And then they have a trial for him in 2019. So this Pope story comes out as Tony Hernandez is going to trial in October of 2019. So there's more cover up there for this, the black eye, the dirty deals that Obama and Biden had done that included the Vatican are getting covered up by this Two Popes movie at the release time of it.
Yeah, the movie is supposed to be about the time of the WikiLeaks scandal. And what's happening is that the two popes are meeting at Castle Gandolfo, which is the summer home.
Yeah, that's the summer home
of the popes in Rome, right outside of the Vatican, about 45 minutes outside of Rome. It's a beautiful place, which is a summer retreat. And Bergoglio is also has submitted his resignation to be Archbishop in Buenos Aires, another complicated story, and the Vatican has not accepted it. And so the two of them, the context is that Pope Benedict is trying to encourage Bergoglio to go ahead and resign. And he's also saying, well, I'm thinking about no longer being Pope. I'm thinking about resigning as Pope. And so therefore it's supposed to be this this friendly conversation between the two, which would make the transition one that was necessary because of outside forces. When in fact, the truth was that, I'm sure Benedict XVI was being blackmailed. I'm sure he was being forced to resign or else face other dire consequences. Bergoglio was being promoted by the CIA and other deep church factions in order to take over the church, to push it in an LGBT direction. And so therefore, this is a cover-up story to cover up Honduras, to cover up the official pedophilia scandal on the border, tracing back to Obama with the Catholic Church in Chicago. Remember, Catholic Church was making millions of dollars supporting illegal immigration.
That's
and
right.
making a haven for these illegal immigrants to come into the Catholic Church. The original sanctuary cities ideas largely originated with Catholic hierarchy in California and other states, which was trying to protect the illegal immigrants from deportation at that time. Okay, so this goes back decades. And now with these two Pope movies, I'd like you to, Chris, if we could play the trailer. Let's play a little bit of the trailer of this movie, because wait and see what a kind of warm and fuzzy relationship they try to show between Bergoglio and Benedict XVI.
And that's Anthony Hopkins.
Do you know the Beatles?
Yes, I know who they are.
Of course you do.
And Bergoglio.
Eleanor
Anthony
Rigby.
Hopkins is the Anthony Hopkins.
Eleanor Rigby.
No, I don't know.
You know, Yellow Submarine.
Stop it for a second.
Yellow Submarine.
Okay, Chris. So Anthony Hopkins is playing Pope Benedict XVI, and Jonathan Bryce is playing the Bergoglio.
Right.
Okay, and the two of them are in these conversations. Look at how talking about the Beatles and how friendly they are, and this is all designed to say that Benedict XVI is old, he's frail, he needs to retire, and he's encouraging Bergoglio to come up and to assume a greater responsibility in the Catholic Church, to voice his views about resigning as Archbishop. And again, Bergoglio was known to have these LGBT inclinations, etc., and lifestyle. And that's not in the movie at all.
No. He talks about tango dancing in the movie. They have a sort of a portion where he was they show a lot of his life in Buenos Aires as a young man, deciding to be the Pope, deciding to join the priesthood. He has a girlfriend he is about to propose to, and instead of proposing to her, he decides to he tells her, "I'm going to be a priest," and she gets very upset with him. So there's this sort of heartbreak scene of a young man choosing the church over this lovely young woman. But he tells Pope in the movie, Pope Bergoglio movie, tells Pope Benedict in the movie, "I love to tango." They actually wind up tangoing together in the Vatican. That's one of the last scenes. So there's this sort of overlay of, I'm a liberal guy and I can do whatever I want, and so that's part of the movie too.
And making him more modern, more acceptable. I mean, this is progressive. He can tango. He had a woman he was going to be married to. Okay, now they don't disclose the full nature of that relationship with the woman. They don't disclose other relationships that he's had, that Bergoglio has supposedly had with his own gay relationships in Argentina. None of that's been brought into this at all. Okay, and so therefore these two popes, are just discussing the transition of power and how it would make sense for, Bergoglio to resign as Archbishop and become Pope, because Benedict is going to resign because of this scandal. He's getting old. His health isn't all that good. And so this is the cover story that masks the truth and the reality, which is this is a CIA coup. And these two really had none of these cordial meetings. This is all fiction. It's all cover story. It's all made up.
Right,
Mike? Let's play a little bit.
By the Obama-backed Netflix group. Yep, that's correct.
Obama scripted reality. Okay, let's go for a little bit more of this.
Silly. It's very funny. You've been one of my harshest critics. The way you live is a criticism. Your shoes are a criticism.
You don't like my shoes?
Cuando tenga la tierra, sembraré las palabras
You think you know better?
que mi padre
We are no longer part of this world.
You know, the hardest thing is to listen, to hear his voice, God's voice.
Cuando tenga la tierra, te lo juro, semilla, nuestro fin.
It's not me who needs to be satisfied. It's 1.2 billion believers.
You know, there's a saying, God always corrects one pope by presenting the world with another pope. I'd like to see my correction.
Okay, so the whole theme of this is the Argentinian, the tango, they do reveal that Bergoglio supported the generals when the generals were killing students in the university. So the Bergoglio story is very complex in Argentina.
Yeah, he was seen as being a traitor to fellow priests, and they show a big part of that in the movie. And the director of the movie gave an interview with PBS where he talked about when he was growing up in Brazil. You know, it was known in Brazil too that the U.S. through the CIA and the U.S. were going into Argentina and Brazil and influencing their politics, and to keep the communists out and empower the hard right, the military juntas. Well, that was the dirty war in Argentina, and Pope Francis, young Bergoglio, is part of that. And they show him basically kind of betraying some of his priests and betraying a friend. And he apologizes for it, and he kind of confesses to it. But you got to wonder behind the scenes what really happened. And he's always said he was trying to inform his friends and not inform on his friends. And he was trying to, interact with the colonels and the dirty war, the right wingers, to protect his friends. But that's not really what happened. So then he moves up the ladder through the CIA association to eventually become the Pope.
Well, eventually, the CIA at one point or another was anti-communist, and then, yes, in the period of time, which was in the 70s, when the CIA was trying to eliminate communism in Argentina through the military juntas and in Brazil. But ultimately, the CIA itself became communist. And so therefore, Bergoglio becomes LGBT, and this now becomes the New World Order philosophy of the CIA. CIA today is not the CIA of the 1960s or the 1970s, although the CIA has always been globalist. It's always wanted to have a global government. It's just that abandoned the anti-communism and started embracing communism as a force to change traditional belief in God, to change American democracy. They decided that ultimately our freedoms were the biggest barrier to achieving their new world order globalism.
Right.
And so therefore, Bergoglio became useful to the CIA both during the junta, and then they switched around, and when it comes down time to be LGBT, Bergoglio's their guy again.
Right. He's morality laundering. They use him for morality laundering. That they get 1.2 billion Catholics around the world to listen to the Pope, and he's telling them, "Oh, I like what Obama does. Obama's view on the environment is correct. Obama's view on, restricting the Catholic Church in China is correct. This is all globalist stuff. The unlimited immigration. We're going to let refugees roam the world without borders. That's what Bergoglio, Pope Francis, and Obama wanted. And they wanted to do it in America because they wanted to replace American voters with refugee Democrat voters.
And also destroy the Catholic Church, destroy the traditional Catholic Church. And you see now the FBI saying that the white supremacists, the real the insurgent factor in America is Catholics who like the traditional Latin Mass, which of course Vatican II got rid of
Right.
in the progressive movement. This other book here on the synodal process, and this is about Bergoglio. The synodal process is a meeting of bishops with the local believers, and the whole idea is that they wanted to have radical inclusion. In other words, part of the working documents of the synodal movement is that the Catholic Church needed to reach out, not just for the liberation theology, where Jesus Christ was the church of the poor. It was hard for a rich man to go to heaven, but now the church has got to be in favor of the marginalizing society, the materially dispossessed, oppressed people such as women, indigenous peoples, blacks, homosexuals, etc. And so therefore the church was supposed to find a place at the table for all of these minorities and include the homosexuals, include all, I mean, okay, do we include then pedophilia? Do we include bestiality? Do we include necrophilia? Do we include snuff films?
Yeah.
Or where do you draw the line? Of course, if all these are just sexual choices, and then one's as good as the other, then Satan can have a chair at the table, because Satan's got a religion too. And so you start preaching the inclusive ecumenical movement. We're going to accept the Hindus. We're going to accept, all these religions. It's all kumbaya. It's just believe in God. As long as we are not hating, we're going to, what was the line that was in the movie? We don't want to build fences. We want to build dialogue.
Bridges, not fences. Bridges, not walls. I like a man who builds bridges, not walls. That's what Pope Francis said about when in 2016, when he was flying back from Mexico. They actually, as part of the Obama anti-Trump program, they used Pope Francis. He went to Mexico in February of 2016, and he did a mass on the border in El Paso, Texas, and he basically blessed he looked across the border and blessed the customs enforcement people, the border protection people. And then on the flight home, one of the journalists asked him, what do you think about such and such? He said, I like a person. And I think they were asking about Trump. He said, I like somebody who builds bridges, not walls. And he questioned his religion. And Trump came back and hit him pretty hard. He said, hey, look, I'm a Christian guy. That Pope has no right to question my religion. And the Vatican had to walk that statement back by the Pope the very next day. But he was clearly a tool for the Obama-Biden operation to get rid of Trump. That was in 2016.
So in the J'accuse, there's a first statement by Vigano. He's talking about the excommunication. He says, I regard the accusations against me as an honor. I believe that the very wording of the charges confirms the theses that I have repeatedly defended in my various addresses. It is no coincidence that the accusation against me concerns the questioning of the legitimacy of Jorge Mario Bergoglio and the rejection of Vatican II. The council represents the ideological, theological, moral, and liturgical cancer of which the Bergoglian, quote, synodal church, synods, end quote, is the necessary metastasis. And the next paragraph is necessary for the episcopate, the clergy, the people of God, to seriously ask themselves whether it is consistent with the profession of the Catholic faith to passively witness the systematic destruction of the church by its leaders, just as other subversives are destroying civil society. Globalism calls for ethnic substitution. Bergoglio promotes uncontrolled immigration and calls for the integration of cultures and religions. Globalism supports the LGBTQ plus ideology. Bergoglio authorizes the blessing of same-sex couples and imposes on the faithful the acceptance of homosexuality while covering up the scandals of his proteges and promoting them to the highest positions of responsibility. Globalism imposes the green agenda. Bergoglio worships the idol of the Pachamama, writes delirious encyclicals about the environment, supports the UN's Agenda 2030, and attacks those who question the theory of man-made global warming. He goes beyond his role in matters that strictly pertain to science, but always and only in one direction, a direction that is diametrically opposed to what the church has always taught. He has mandated the use of experimental gene serums, which caused very serious damage, death, and sterility, calling them, quote, an act of love, end quote, in exchange for funding from pharmaceutical companies and philanthropic foundations. His total alignment with the Davos religion is scandalous. Whenever governments at the service of the World Economic Forum have introduced or extended abortion, promoted vice, legitimized homosexual unions or gender transition, encouraged euthanasia, and tolerated the persecution of Catholics, not a word has been spent in the defense of the faith or morals that are threatened or in support of the civil battles of so many Catholics who have been abandoned by the Vatican and the bishops. Not a word about the persecuted Catholics in China, the complicity of the Holy See, which considers Beijing's billions more important than the lives and freedoms of Chinese who are faithful to the Roman Church. In the synodal church presided over by Bergoglio, no schism is recognized among the German episcopate or among the government-controlled bishops who have been consecrated in China without the mandate of Rome, because their action is consistent with the destruction of the church and therefore must be concealed, minimized, tolerated, and fully encouraged. In the 11 years of pontificate, Catholic Church has been humiliated and directed above all because of the scandals and corruptions of the leaders of the hierarchy, which have been totally ignored, even as the most ruthless Vatican authoritarianism raged against faithful priests and religious, small communities of traditional nuns, and communities tied to the Latin Mass. Okay, so I think that's a very clear statement by Archbishop Vigano, calling out what Bergoglio and Obama have done in the deep church to destroy the Catholic Church, just as the deep state has worked to destroy the Constitution and our freedoms. And Biden is the epitome of that. And under Biden's administration, where McCarrick openly positioned to get homosexuality, pedophilia, child sex trade, and drugs entered into the United States through Honduras and the southern border.
Right. Yeah, there are rape trees along the southern border because of what Theodore McCarrick, Pope Francis, Dennis McDonough, Joe Biden, and Barack Obama did with the Alliance for Prosperity from 2014 to 2016. It's absolutely, they put cartel devils in alignment with the Catholic Church, and that is, they're not working for God. That's what the Pope is supposed to be working for the brethren, the believers of Christ. He's not. He's working for the CIA. This is a travesty, and this has to be understood by 1.2 billion Catholics around the world. It's going to take a lot of work to get this word out, but I think it's going to happen. People are really starting to wake up to, there's a spiritual awakening going on in the world for a lot of different reasons, in a lot of different ways. And I hope this can be part of it.
Well, we have a clip to end this with one incident in which Pope Francis, Bergoglio, and Pope Benedict XVI were together in the Vatican, and prominently seated in the audience is McCarrick before he was laicized.
Right.
And I think let's show this one clip if we can, because again, it's not accidental that Bergoglio is highlighting McCarrick in an appearance of Pope Benedict XVI together with Pope Francis early on in Pope Francis's papacy. So let's play this clip. If we can enlarge it, there we go. There's Pope Francis and Pope Benedict together. Pope Benedict, of course, is the one with the white hair.
That's very rare that they did that. And there's
Yes.
McCarrick sitting
There's
right there.
McCarrick. He's in the first row right there on the right. He's one turning his head to the left now. McCarrick was sitting right there and positioned front and center, even though he was part of the architect of the coup d'etat and of the pedophilia, sex trade, and drugs in Honduras coming in through the southern border.
So
another Obama operation, which Biden was fully behind.
Right. Now that ceremony that was very rare. The two of them didn't get together very often. That was the 65th anniversary of Cardinal Pope Benedict, Cardinal Ratzinger's entry into the priesthood, June 30th, 2016. Where McCarrick was doing there was, first of all, he's invited and he's given a front row seat. And they knew where he was going to sit, and they knew where the videos were going to be taken from. So they put him in a position of prominence. He's in this video clip. This is by the Wall Street Journal. It's a brief video report. And then what happens is McCarrick leaves after he has his meetings with Pope Francis. He goes to China, and he is working with Pope Francis and the Obama people, and they're betraying the Catholic Church in China. And I happen to know that today is Cardinal Zen's birthday. Cardinal Zen is one of the chief. He's a cardinal of Hong Kong and is the leader of the Catholic Church in China. He's had a lot of difficulties since basically Pope Francis betrayed his underground China Catholic Church to the Chinese Communist parties. So that's where this video. That's what McCarrick was going to do. McCarrick went to China 8 times over the course of his career. So he was, and in 2000, President Bush nominated McCarrick and said, we want him to be the #1 contact between the Vatican and China on behalf of the United States. So they had a lot of deep state operations with McCarrick into China. And one of the places he stayed when he was in China was in a seminary. And that's his background, is molesting seminarians. So it just seems to me the whole thing was rotten and dirty and dark. They put McCarrick over there in a seminary in Beijing, and who knows what if he took advantage of that, if they set him up in like a honeypot situation there, and they just used him to destroy the Catholic Church in China, because that's what they've done.
Well, you notice in this clip, which of course legitimates McCarrick's role in the Vatican and is a prelude to him going to China, Pope Benedict XVI is not wearing the papal cap. So he's no longer supposedly Pope. Now, again, I think in Catholic theology and in Catholic, the whole tradition of how this transfer went, I think we can question whether Pope Benedict was actually Pope at that time and Pope Francis an illegitimate Pope, which is what Archbishop Vigano is arguing today. And so therefore this illegitimacy of the papacy, this coup d'etat, is one that, you can begin to question Biden's role in the 2020 election, which will soon be examined as having been stolen.
Right. And one last thing I'll say about this. So the Two Popes movie comes out. It gets nominated for the Academy Awards. The Academy Awards that year is in 2020, the middle of February 2020. That's right when the Wuhan virus is rolling out. People are just starting. It's just starting to get traction with awareness of the Wuhan virus when the Academy Awards hits. Nobody's wearing face masks. They have their big ceremony, and they're showing all these pro-Pope things. A month after the Academy Awards hits, the Pope is in the Vatican, and he tells Catholics around the world that for the first time in 500 years, the health concerns are so serious with this pandemic, don't go to church. He dissuades them from going to church from a special speech that he gives in St. Peter's Square. It's an empty St. Peter's Square. He basically betrays the church. Jesus Christ died on the cross for his beliefs. Every apostle that followed Jesus Christ was martyred for his beliefs. But Pope Francis said, there's a sickness out there, don't go to church, don't worship. And they shut down the churches. And the Catholic Church has yet to recover its strength. I was at a ceremony at a church this summer, and the pastor said, You guys started watching church on television and you never came back to church. I went to that same church for Christmas Mass at 10 o'clock on Christmas Eve. There was about 50 people in the church. There should have been 300. The church attendance has dropped dramatically since Pope Francis did that. And it was done in accordance with what the globalists want, with what Obama Biden wanted to do. And that's the second part of my book. That's the Wuhan pandemic. And Pope Francis played a significant role in that too.
Okay, well, we're going to wrap up here, and we've covered a lot of ground today. Mike's current book, let me show it one more time here as we conclude, is this book here. It's the case to impeach and imprison Joe Biden, and it's out by Bombardier Books. It's on Amazon. And your next book, Mike, which is in print, will be out in February. What's it entitled?
An Almost Insurmountable Evil: How Obama's Deep State Defiled the Catholic Church and Executed the Wuhan Pandemic.
We're going to be covering this story continuously until we get a resolution of the coup d'etat, this hopefully late great CIA taking over the Catholic Church with the cooperation of Obama. So the deep state was planning a coup d'etat, which was Obama's presidency, to make sure that the White House fell in the hands of the woke, and that we had the fundamental change of America to this critical theory dystopia. I think the American people have rejected it. The grace of God, we got to see in 4 years of the Biden administration the dystopia these people wanted to create. They hate life. They embrace abortion. They embrace euthanasia. They embrace anything that has to do with killing, pandemics, vaccines that kill you. I mean, the list goes on. And, of course, we'll get banned from telling the truth on YouTube, which will say, well, we're doing disinformation. Well, this is the truth. In other words, that anything is disinformation is what the deep state doesn't want you to hear, that we've been living in a Truman Show since the John Kennedy assassination in 1963. Any last comments here, Mike, before we sign off?
Well, yeah, and Joe Biden just announced that the Pope was going to he nominated him for the Presidential Honorary Medal or something just a couple days ago.
I mean, Medal of Freedom.
Medal of Freedom. So this is still the Joe Biden, and still putting out a cover story for Pope Francis to this day.
Supporting abortion, which, of course, how can a Catholic that supports abortion be welcome at the sacraments, let alone celebrated in the Vatican? In the end, God always wins. God's going to win here too. And I encourage us all to embrace the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, getting down on our knees and asking God to forgive us for letting Satan rule to the extent Satan has ruled. And we need to do now accept our responsibility for allowing this to have happened. God will hear our prayer and heal our land. That's what we're advised in 2 Chronicles 7:14. It's Dr. Jerome Corsi, and our guest today has been Mike McCormick. And we'll have Mike back when his new book appears in February. Once more, Mike, the title of the new book?
An Almost Insurmountable Evil: How Obama's Deep State Defiled the Catholic Church and Executed the Wuhan Pandemic.